that there are two verses, and we need to hear the second verse, which says, "Oh, thus be it ever, when free men shall stand between their loved homes and the war's desolation, blessed with victory and peace, may the heaven rescued land praise the power that has made and preserved us a nation. Then conquer we must when our cause it is just, and this be our motto: in God is our trust, and the Star-Spangled Banner in triumph shall wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave."
My name's Ed Snowden. I'm 29 years old. I work for Booz Allen Hamilton as an infrastructure analyst for NSA in Hawaii.
What are some of the positions that you held previously within the intelligence community?
I've been a systems engineer, systems administrator, senior advisor for the Central Intelligence Agency, solutions consultant, and a telecommunications information systems officer.
One of the things people are going to be most interested in trying to understand who you are and what you're thinking is there came some point in time when you crossed this line of thinking about being a whistleblower to making the choice to actually become a whistleblower. Walk people through that decision-making process.
When you're in positions of privileged access, like a systems administrator for these sort of intelligence community agencies, you're exposed to a lot more information on a broader scale than the average employee. And because of that, you see things that may be disturbing, but over the course of a normal person's career, you'd only see one or two of these instances. When you see everything, you see them on a more frequent basis, and you recognize that some of these things are actually abuses. And when you talk to people about them in a place like this, where this is the normal state of business, people tend not to take them very seriously and move on from them. But over time, that awareness of wrongdoing sort of builds up, and you feel compelled to talk about it. And the more you talk about it, the more you're ignored, the more you're told it's not a problem, until eventually you realize that these things need to be determined by the public, not by somebody who was simply hired by the government.
Talk a little bit about how the American surveillance state actually functions. Does it target the actions of Americans?
NSA and the intelligence community in general is focused on getting intelligence wherever it can, by any means possible, that it believes on the grounds of sort of a self-certification that they serve the national interest. Originally, we saw that focus very narrowly tailored as foreign intelligence gathered overseas. Now, increasingly, we see that it's happening domestically. And to do that, the NSA specifically targets the communications of everyone. It ingests them by default. It collects them in its system, and it filters them, and it analyzes them, and it measures them, and it stores them for periods of time, simply because that's the easiest, most efficient, and most valuable way to achieve these ends. So while they may be intending to target someone associated with a foreign government or someone that they suspect of terrorism, they're collecting your communications to do so. Any analyst at any time can target anyone, any selector, anywhere. Where those communications will be picked up depends on the range of the sensor networks and the authorities that that analyst is empowered with. Not all analysts have the ability to target everything, but I, sitting at my desk, certainly had the authorities to wiretap anyone, from you or your accountant to a federal judge to even the president if I had a personal email.
One of the extraordinary parts about this episode is that usually whistleblowers do what they do anonymously and take steps to remain anonymous for as long as they can, which they hope often is forever. You, on the other hand, have decided to do the opposite, which is to declare yourself openly as the person behind these disclosures. Why did you choose to do that?
I think that the public is owed an explanation of the motivations behind the people who make these disclosures that are outside of the democratic model. When you are subverting the power of government, that's a fundamentally dangerous thing to democracy. And if you do that in secret consistently, as the government does when it wants to benefit from a secret action that it took, it'll kind of give its officials a mandate to go, hey, tell the press about this thing and that thing, so the public is on our side. But they rarely, if ever, do that when an abuse occurs. That falls to individual citizens, but they're typically maligned. It becomes a thing of these people are against the country, they're against the government. But I'm not. I'm no different from anybody else. I don't have special skills. I'm just another guy who sits there day to day in the office, watches what's happening, and goes, this is something that's not our place to decide. The public needs to decide whether these programs and policies are right or wrong. And I'm willing to go on the record to defend the authenticity of them and say, I didn't change these. I didn't modify the story. This is the truth. This is what's happening. You should decide whether we need to be doing this.
Have you given thought to what it is that the U.S. government's response to your conduct is, in terms of what they might say about you, how they might try to depict you, what they might try to do to you?
Yeah, I could be, rendered by the CIA. I could have people come after me, or any of their third-party partners. They work closely with a number of other nations. Or they could pay off the triads, or any of their agents or assets. We've got a CIA station just up the road in the consulate here in Hong Kong, and I'm sure they're going to be very busy for the next week. And that's a fear I'll live under for the rest of my life, however long that happens to be. You can't come forward against the world's most powerful intelligence agencies and be completely free from risk, because they're such powerful adversaries that no one can meaningfully oppose them. If they want to get you, they'll get you in time. But at the same time, you have to make a determination about what it is that's important to you. And if living unfreely but comfortably is something you're willing to accept, and I think many of us are, it's the human nature. You can get up every day, you can go to work, you can collect your large paycheck for relatively little work against the public interest, and go to sleep at night after watching your shows. But if you realize that that's the world that you helped create, and it's going to get worse with the next generation and the next generation who extend the capabilities of this sort of architecture of oppression, you realize that you might be willing to accept any risk. And it doesn't matter what the outcome is, so long as the public gets to make their own decisions about how that's applied.
Why should people care about surveillance?
Because even if you're not doing anything wrong, you're being watched and recorded. And the storage capability of these systems increases every year consistently by orders of magnitude, to where it's getting to the point you don't have to have done anything wrong. You simply have to eventually fall under suspicion from somebody, even by a wrong call. And then they can use the system to go back in time and scrutinize every decision you've ever made, every friend you've ever discussed something with, and attack you on that basis to sort of derive suspicion from an innocent life and paint anyone in the context of a wrongdoer.
We are currently sitting in a room in Hong Kong, which is where we are because you've traveled here. Talk a little bit about why it is that you came here, and specifically there are going to be people who will speculate that what you really intend to do is to defect to the country that many see as the #1 rival of the United States, which is China, and that what you're really doing is essentially seeking to aid an enemy of the United States with which you intend to seek asylum. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So there's a couple assertions in those arguments that are sort of embedded in the questioning of the choice of Hong Kong. The first is that China is an enemy of the United States. It's not. I mean, there are conflicts between the United States government and the Chinese PRC government, but the peoples inherently, you know, we don't care. We trade with each other freely. You know, we're not at war. We're not in armed conflict, and we're not trying to be. We're the largest trading partners out there for each other. Additionally, Hong Kong has a strong tradition of free speech. People think, oh, China, great firewall. Mainland China does have significant restrictions on free speech, but the people of Hong Kong have a long tradition of protesting in the streets, of making their views known. The internet is not filtered here, no more so than any other Western government. And I believe that the Hong Kong government is actually independent in relation to a lot of other leading Western governments.
If your motive had been to harm the United States and help its enemies, or if your motive had been personal material gain, were there things that you could have done with these documents to advance those goals that you didn't end up doing?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, anybody in the positions of access with the technical capabilities that I had could, you know, suck out secrets, pass them on the open market to Russia. You know, they always have an open door, as we do. I had access to, you know, the full rosters of everyone working at the NSA, the entire intelligence community, and undercover assets all around the world, the locations of every station we have, what their missions are, and so forth. If I had just wanted to harm the U.S., you know, that you could shut down the surveillance system in an afternoon, but that's not my intention. And I think for anyone making that argument, they need to think, if they were in my position, and you know, you live a privileged life, you're living in Hawaii in paradise and making a ton of money, what would it take to make you leave everything behind? The greatest fear that I have regarding the outcome for America of these disclosures is that nothing will change. People will see in the media all of these disclosures. They'll know the lengths that the government is going to grant themselves powers unilaterally to create greater control over American society and global society. But they won't be willing to take the risks necessarily to stand up and fight to change things, to force their representatives to actually take a stand in their interests. And the months ahead, the years ahead, it's only going to get worse until eventually there will be a time where policies will change, because the only thing that restricts the activities of the surveillance state are policy. Even our agreements with other sovereign governments, we consider that to be a stipulation of policy rather than a stipulation of law. And because of that, a new leader will be elected. They'll flip the switch, say that because of the crisis, because of the dangers that we face in the world, you know, some new and unpredicted threat, we need more authority, we need more power, and there will be nothing the people can do at that point to oppose it, and it'll be turnkey tyranny.
Big Brother is watching you, and he has been for some time now. Whether you're General Petraeus or the general public, the federal government has the goods on you, and they're not slowing down. Our guest, Bill Binney, former NSA senior technical director, has the goods on the federal government, though, and how they're gathering information on every American citizen in the name of national security, whether they have cause to or not. Bill, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Thanks for being here. First of all, what a brave guy. Do you, I mean, I know we're not in the Soviet Union. I know this isn't Russia. or China, but do you fear for your life being a whistleblower that you are?
Not really. I mean, I feel I'm doing the job that a citizen is supposed to do, standing up for the Constitution and the rights of people.
Now, you worked with the NSA, and you gathered a lot of information. And if I'm not mistaken, the information you gathered, you dealt in mathematics, right?
Yes.
What exactly did you do there?
Well, I worked on breaking codes and data systems and other things that are associated with cipher systems, things like that.
Okay, and so you saw a lot. What was the thing that pushed you over the edge, and kind of prompted you to come out and speak out against the NSA?
Well, it really started right after 9/11 when they started pulling data in on every citizen in the United States. This was coming from the telecommunications companies. That's why they had to get retroactive immunity. They were giving data on all of their customers to NSA to graph or build social networks so they can monitor what people were doing. But the real, and from that time until 2010, I was working with several others who were with me in this, trying to get the government to address the unconstitutional and illegal activity that they were doing. But we were basically totally unsuccessful at getting them to even recognize that they should change their ways and start doing things legally and out in the open and in a constitutionally acceptable way.
And you say that's unconstitutional and illegal. What practices? Obviously, these guys are going to have to gather information on people to, attempt to stop terrorism, which is obviously, as you point out, the genesis of this. But is it, how much of it is publicly available data? How much of it is actually illegally obtained?
Virtually all of it initially was illegally obtained simply because the government went to telecommunications company and asked them for all the customer data. That basically, and putting that together, building social networks for everybody in the country is a violation of the Pen Register Law, the Stored Communications Act, and the Electronic Privacy Act, as well as the constitutional rights of everybody. Plus, it violated the 1947 Intelligence Act and the FISA laws.
Walk me through the Electronic Privacy Act. This is interesting to me because I think this is the one that was passed in the 1980s when there was very little, obviously, electronic communication going on. Or is this a stored communication, whichever bill it is. It was passed in the 80s. It's completely outdated, but it also says that basically anybody without a warrant can look at any email that's 6 months or older, correct?
It has to do with data that's 6 months or older, yes. That's free. They protected the first 180 days worth of data. Right.
So how is this not being updated? Obviously now we do keep emails longer than 6 months.
Yes, that's right. I think what they've done is they've updated, they built this into the Patriot Act, Section 215, in their secret interpretation, which says that they can get any data in any third party, like any commercial data that's held about U.S. citizens, the government can obtain. And that's their secret interpretation of the Section 215 of the Patriot Act. And they're using that as secret interpretation to assemble all this data and justifying it through that.
And Bill, you're telling us that they're collecting this information on every American citizen?
They can't get anybody that doesn't do something electronically, so that eliminates babies in cribs, people in hospice, that kind of thing.
The Amish. Many of the Amish.
Yeah, some of the Amish that actually do Amish things.
Right.
Now, and then they store all of this information somewhere, and in fact they're building a new facility that is just absolutely massive. Tell us about this Bluffdale, Utah facility they're building now to house all this information.
Bluffdale is simply a storage site that they're building that is going to cost, I think, a little over $2 billion. And of the million square feet that's being built there, 100,000 square feet is going to be devoted to storage. At least that's what that's what they've outlined. Now, according to the cleversafe.com and what's commercially available right now, that size of storage space would accommodate on the order of 5 zettabytes of data, which would mean, to me, if you eliminate things like video being passed across the fiber optic networks and the analog audio that you don't want from people that aren't targets, then you could store basically the communication of about 100 years of the world in that space.
Think how big that is. I mean, look around this studio here for a second. This studio is gigantic. It's 15,000 square feet.
Yeah.
You're talking about 7 times the area of this filled with just computers, just storing data on American citizens. I mean, that's frightening.
Well, I assume they're storing on the world, but U.S. citizens are a part of that storage, yes.
Now, let me bring in General Petraeus. Here's a guy, no one's defending what he did. I mean, not even him. I mean, all reports say he's, feeling terrible about this at this point. But the weird thing when it comes to digital communications is how the military kind of came upon this information that he was having an affair. It kind of seems like, I mean, was it even legal? It seems like a lot of snooping, to be perfectly honest.
Yes, and it was. My guess, it was motivated by something political. But what it's saying is they went into the storage of information that they have on everybody and pulled out all of his email, and that's what they did also with General Allen. Director Mueller basically said that that's what they've set up to be able to do when he testified to the Senate Judiciary Committee on the 30th of March of 2011 when he was responding to a question that was posed to him about how he would prevent a future Fort Hood, that is a terrorist inside this country, becoming radicalized and killing people inside this country.
Wow.
Well, he said that he got together with the DOD and they've created this, what he called was a technology database where he can make one query and get all past and all future emails as they come in on people. So that says all of it's stored.
So what's your solution to, I mean, you mentioned the Patriot Act before, and I mean, you don't come across at least as one of these guys who doesn't acknowledge that terrorism is a problem or that it's a serious issue that we do need to investigate. What's the solution to stopping this stuff without crossing over the line and affecting American citizens' rights?
Well, I think we originally, when we were putting together our original program, had built-in protections for U.S. citizens or anyone else that you wanted to protect in the world by encrypting all attributes and randomly doing it so that positionally things were not the same, so you couldn't crib values into it. But that in itself would protect all the U.S. citizens if they simply did that. You could not randomly go in and pull, like for example, if they wanted to get General Petraeus' email, they couldn't go into it with his attributes and pull it out because the system wouldn't recognize it. They couldn't find it.
Bill, one of the things that drives me out of my mind is Americans who say, well, I'm not doing anything wrong. Why should I worry about it? What do you say to people like that?
They don't get to define what's right and wrong. It's the central government that does that.
Yeah, and so what's right and wrong to you, in other words, may not be right or wrong to the U.S. government or whatever government is surveilling you.
That's correct.
You might not think you're doing anything wrong. They may. And that's the real danger here.
Well, look at the Petraeus situation for an example. I mean, here's a guy who's the head of the CIA, our most accomplished general, at least in recent memory. And, yes, is it a military crime, and it's still a crime that's not really pursued in many states. But adultery is I mean, it's bad as it is. I think there's a list of 10 rules that it was one of those. And that would be a problematic thing maybe for later in life. But as far as the actual government goes, I mean, it's not a high crime and misdemeanor here. We're talking about something that's sort of secondary, and they'll go to that extent to out somebody who may have had a political issue. That's frightening.
Bill, you're a true patriot. Appreciate all your efforts. Appreciate what you're doing. Thanks a lot. Stay away from polonium.
This administration also puts forward a false choice between the liberties we cherish and the security we provide. I will provide our intelligence and law enforcement agencies with the tools they need to track and take out the terrorists without undermining our Constitution and our freedom. That means no more illegal wiretapping of American citizens. No more national security letters to spy on citizens who are not suspected of a crime. No more tracking citizens who do nothing more than protest a misguided war. No more ignoring the law when it is inconvenient. That is not who we are. And it's not what is necessary to defeat the terrorists. The FISA court works. The separation of powers works. Our Constitution works. We will again set an example for the world that the law is not subject to the whims of stubborn rulers and that justice is not arbitrary. This administration acts like violating civil liberties is the way to enhance our security. It is not. There are no shortcuts to protecting America.
I specifically said that one of the things that we're going to have to discuss and debate is how are we striking this balance between the need to keep the American people safe and our concerns about privacy. You can't have 100% security and also then have 100% privacy. That's not to suggest that you just say, trust me, we're doing the right thing, we know who the bad guys are. And the reason that's not how it works is because we've got congressional oversight and judicial oversight. And if people can't trust not only the executive branch, but also don't trust Congress and don't trust federal judges to make sure that we're abiding by the Constitution, due process, and rule of law, then we're going to have some problems here.